Present.
Ryan Hoover.
Present.
Doug Castater.
Present.
Chris Pranger.
Present.
Pete Reinl is not present. And John Good.
Present.
And Susan Sleeper.
Okay, I can affirm that we do have a quorum to hold the meeting. Is there any amendments? Do we have received any other information in I need to change the agenda for? Okay, so we'll keep the agenda as it is laid out. RDC officers, welcome Ryan. We have a new member of the RDC. Approval of minutes from our March 12th meeting. You guys all received a copy of this via email. Is there any changes you'd like to be made? If there are none, I'll entertain a motion.
Make a motion to approve the minutes from March 12th. Second.
Seeing a first and second, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those pass. You need us to sign those, Susan?
You have a folder there
Yep.
with all, you can do them all at once if you.
All right. I sent you also that Susan sent out a notification of approval to the RDC budget to the county council and the commissioners, and they have both accepted our budget. That is just notification for you. And Auburn Fire Department, I also sent you out some emails in regards to the payment for the containers. So you guys authorized myself and Chris to be able to approve that, for which we did. So you have a copy of that. Is there any questions regarding that?
I would have them formally approve those, even though they've already been that was part of what the discussion before was. You have the authority to go forward, but then the commission still ultimately
Needs to approve that?
approves just to cover our bases.
Okay. So we approved the paying of an invoice for $19,159 for the containers. You have that? Chris and I both did the email and we approved it. So we just need to say we have a vote on it.
Yep.
Motion?
Make a motion to approve the Auburn shipping container invoice.
I'll second it.
Okay, seeing first and second, all in favor? Aye?
Aye.
Opposed? That carries. All right, now we have the resolutions for the Butler Police Department. Zach, would you like to just quick summary of that?
So this resolution for the Butler Police Department, in our last meeting, we talked about the various items that they are looking to purchase for public safety. We confirmed that Butler, while not located in the areas, they do provide services to our TIF areas over there. So what this resolution does is approves them for funding in an amount not to exceed $155,766.95. And likely we will, once we get through this, then we can have a discussion on kind of similar to Auburn, the Auburn Hazmat facility, on approval of invoices and all of that. We would need another motion because we had a specific motion on the Auburn situation. So That, in a nutshell, is what this resolution is. If anyone has any questions, feel free.
Questions for Newing? No, we do need a motion for this one?
Yes.
Okay, entertain a motion for approval.
I make a motion to approve the Butler Police Department request. No,
Great,
Resolution
Resolution?
2025-RDC-1.
correct.
I'll second that motion.
we have a first and second. Any discussion? No? All in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? That carries. Pass this down for you guys to all sign. Resolution number 2 is for the Butler Fire Department. This is resolution number 2025 RDC number -2. So it's the same as the other one. This one goes up to $928,490, which we approved in our last meetings
For a tanker truck and a brush truck.
for the tanker truck and the brush truck. Anybody have any questions on that? So I'll entertain a motion.
Make a motion to pay the Butler Fire Request Resolution number 2025-RDC-2.
Second.
Okay, we have a first and second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. I'm passing this down as well. Great. Chief Mosteller. Do you have any update on the payment terms with Spencer?
Okay, as far as the brush truck, we have actually made a down payment on that to get it going. That came out of our general fund, which is something that the city had already earmarked for something else. So what we have to do is try to get as quickly as possible a retain back to come back to our general fund with that one, which I think was in the neighborhood of 186, right? 186,000. That got the chassis out of ATM or API down in Fort Wayne to Spencer.
Okay.
So, how do you want us to do that? Do you want Spencer to do and send something to you as an invoice to that, or how does that work?
Susan?
Okay, but you're wanting us to reimburse the city first?
Yes, that would be,
So the city will have to invoice me, send me
Okay.
an invoice with the backup showing that they paid it. And then I can pay that way. The rest of it can, either way, whether it goes to you and you guys forward it to me,
okay,
and then however you guys decide to approve it.
Okay, so this is the same as with the Auburn Fire Department. We approved for Chris and I to approve these requests, so for a timing issue, so we can get these things rolling. And then we come to the next meeting for a formal approval on it. That would be for both the Butler Fire Department and the Butler Police Department. You guys have any questions, discussion regarding that? Do you want to do the same thing we did for the other one?
And just so it's clear, that's obviously limited to the amount that we have approved.
Right.
And
Not to exceed.
it's limited, so obviously they can't approve an amount that is greater than the total amount that we've approved for either of the departments.
Like Auburn,
It'd be just like the Auburn place, how we did that.
I'm fine with that.
Okay, so how would you like to word that motion?
If someone makes a motion that the president and vice president of the commission have the authority to authorize payment of invoices not to exceed the amount in the resolutions, which will then be brought to the full commission for final approval.
So moved?
Yes.
Well said.
There you go, perfect. We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on that?
Who motioned, who second?
Doug motioned and Ryan seconded.
Is that simply for the Butler Fire, or is that for Butler Fire and
And
police?
police.
For both, yeah.
Any other discussion?
Okay, so I have a question though, since we know that the city put their down payment down, do you want to authorize that to be paid once they invoice me?
Okay, let's do a second so let's finish this motion first, then we'll deal with that one.
How much did you say that?
186.
Okay, so we have the motion on the table right now, so all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, so that motion carries. So we are now authorized to do that as president, vice president. Now for the current invoice you have of 100 and, you know the exact amount?
As far as the one that we've already paid, yeah, 186 even, I believe, wasn't it? I'm pretty sure. Yeah, 186 and stuff is what because it was in two payments. And one was delivery of the chassis to them and then final payment. So it was in half C's.
Okay, 186,000
Correct.
even, okay. So as long as that's what the invoice is gonna be, we can do this.
Yeah, I can look real quick just to make sure.
Why don't you look real quick, just to make sure? I'd hate to short you $100 or something.
Yeah.
Ultimately, if it was off, you could still approve
Right.
the addition based on the other motion, but it would be nice to have it cleanly approved by the whole
Be
commission
clean.
tonight.
Yeah, 186.
Okay, so we have an outstanding invoice for $186,000 payable to the city of Butler, which is a reimbursement for the resolution for the fire department. I'll entertain a motion to pay that.
I'll make a motion that we pay the $186,000 back to the city of Butler towards the fire department, fire trucks.
Second that motion?
First and a second, any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. So there you go. So send the invoice to Susan, and that is now taken care of.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
Uh-huh.
Does anybody have any questions for me as far as how the whole thing will start to?
Did you work out any type of a payment reduction with those guys, or?
They sent that to us originally and stuff when we did it, so that was a $10,000 deduction from the point where those two were together. The biggest problem that we have now is that we've got a very short window before things start to ramp up again. Of course, everybody's kind of using tariffs and things like that as the big thing, but you know, we do have a slight rise in what the cost of the estimate was for our tanker. And that's going to be till the 23rd of May, and then it may go up again after that. So that's why once we okay this thing tonight and we get them to, that's sealed in. So we're good for that part.
Okay, great.
So we should be okay.
Should be okay.
Everything's good. But does anybody have any other questions? Because I know this will come in phases. The first payment stuff, you know, for the tanker part will be $147,000 something or other for the chassis, you know, delivery when Spencer gets the chassis from International or whoever their people are going to be. And then that one there then subsequently will be paid off at the end of delivery, which is 672 days.
Okay.
From that point.
I think you're good to go as far as for us, so.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you so much. With everything that's kind of going on with that, it's kind of,
Yeah,
thank you.
we appreciate it. Thank you. All right, moving into claims. We have two claims before us, two invoices. The first one is for the Leitner Law Firm, and this is for this meeting and some other meetings, and the total amount is $1,008. Does anybody have any questions regarding that? No, okay. And then I think we can, let's do them individually. So let's do a motion for that one, to pay that.
Make a motion to pay the invoice from Lautner Law Firm?
$1,008?
Yes, yeah, correct.
Okay.
I second that.
Okay, we have a first and second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. That is paid. The second one we have is for the HILB group, and this is for a bond payment for the addition of Ryan onto the board, so. It is for $100.
Make a motion to pay the Hill Group invoice for $100.
Second that.
First and second, any discussion? No, saying none. Any, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Carries. All right, we are flying through these. Greg, annual TIF presentation. So Greg has done this for us for a couple of years now. I've asked him to kind of just brief this down a little bit for us since we've heard it last year, and I talked to Ryan about it. So if you have any questions, make sure you're asking any questions you've got. But he's going to try and summarize it so we're not here for an hour.
Absolutely. Can everyone hear me okay? Greg Balsano with Baker Tilly Municipal Advisors. Our firm is a financial advisor to municipalities mostly across the state of Indiana in various areas, including TIF, which we're here to talk about tonight. Again, happy to answer any questions as I go throughout. I'll just kind of talk about, so the first 22 slides or so is kind of a TIF general information about what it can be used for, what it is, how it works. Tax increment financing is the capture of an incremental assessed value in a designated allocation area. So what that means is that when a TIF area is created, a base assessed value is set. That is the net assessed value of all of the properties in that allocation area. The growth that happens over time is called the incremental assessed value. So right, the net assessed value today versus what it was back when the area was originally established. That difference in assessed value is multiplied by that taxing district rate to generate the TIF dollars for the redevelopment commission's use. So those dollars are available for use for a variety of things. Capital expenditures in serving or benefiting the area. Additionally, public safety, as some items have been talked about even today. That was a new rule that was a few years ago where TIF is able to be used for capital expenditures for public safety as well as operating expenditures for public safety. Now, the one thing to keep in mind is that with operating, and this is really anything operating, but operating, you know, the TIF does run out, as you'll see as we talk about. There is expiration date set, so it's always important to keep an eye on when those areas are going to expire, when that money will run dry, if you are paying, you know, kind of ongoing costs, just to keep that in mind. Today, what we're doing is going through the TIF presentation is what it's called. It's called the annual presentation where all of the overlapping tax units were invited to the meeting. That's a requirement under the state statute a few years back that was made, that all redevelopment commissions throughout the state have to invite the overlapping taxing units to a meeting to explain kind of what's going on with the TIF, what's the current status of the TIF. Additionally, another item we'll be talking about today is pass-through assessed value. And so I want to hit on that. So that is a decision that has to be made before June 15th of every single year. And what that is a determination of your captured assessed value for the next taxes payable year. So for this decision, for this year, you'd be looking at taxes payable 2026. What is the determination of, do we need all of that assessed value or TIF, or do we not? And there's a determination that, you know, we're passing through assessed value to the overlapping units because the redevelopment commission doesn't need to capture that for whatever reason that may be. The general rule of thumb with pass-through, and Mr. Leitner, I'm sure can comment on this, if, you know, as far as the legality of pass-through is, the state requirement is that there has to be either one of two things, either 200% of debt service coverage. So what I mean by that is if there were debt payable from your area, you have to have, if you have less than 200%, there's not a requirement to pass through. If you have more than 200% coverage, which we'll get into, but your areas do not have debt service, then if you're not passing through, you have to kind of have a project list. Like, what are you planning to do with the money? You know, what are you planning to do with it? Why are you capturing it? Is it for public safety? Is it for, you know, what is that for? So that's kind of the state requirement behind pass-through, as well as just kind of the decision of, you know, again, what you're doing with the money. So again, we're going to cover a few different points today. I'm going to start with slide 24, because again, the first significant portion is for just kind of TIF 101, and I'm happy to answer any questions about that during or even at a later date if you're reading through it and have questions Zach and John and Susan know, they all know where to reach me. So I'll start with American Heritage Village. So the DeKalb County has 3 economic development areas. An economic development area is where the TIF money can be spent. So it's spent in, serving, or benefiting that economic development area. An allocation area, which can be the same exact boundary as the economic development area, but if you hear that different term, the allocation area is where the TIF money is actually generated. So what I mean by that is what I explained, where the parcels are set at a certain date, the growth and value over time, that's the allocation area. The economic development area, just think of it as, again, oftentimes those boundaries are the same, but it's where the money can be spent, in, serving, or benefiting. So I think it was maybe mentioned earlier, there are cases where projects can lie outside of an economic development area boundary, but if it's determined by the Redevelopment Commission and its attorney that that project is serving or benefiting, then can be an argument that TIF can be used to support that. So again, we'll start with American Heritage Village. You can see on slide 24, kind of a screenshot of where that area lies. And then I'll go on to slide 25. So slide 25 shows that this area was created back in 2002 and will expire on December 1st of 2031. The estimated TIF in 2024 was about $171,240, and you can see that collections came in pretty much right at estimates of $171,224. For 2025, we estimate similar levels of about $173,980 of TIF collected this year for 25. And so again, you'll get a portion of that in spring settlement, which usually comes in June, July, and then the other portion will come in the late fall, early winter, kind of December timeframe.
So the 173,980 is what we already approved? And we're receiving it?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes, yep. That is what you are estimated to receive for this year, correct. Yep.
I have a question. The red area is obviously, that's the TIF. That's where is that the actual allocation area, or is that?
Yes.
That is the allocation, the red?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, sir, yep.
And the economic.
Yeah, and the economic development area.
Yep.
It's
all of the-
sorry, yeah, so that's the American Heritage Village area. So we, as of now, to the question of is that this year's kind of what was approved, at the moment, we would estimate that for pay 2026, it would be kind of similar to this number. The reason we don't have pay 26 assessed values, those have not been released yet, or tax rates for that matter. So we can't make an estimate quite yet on 2026. So for just estimate purposes, I would say that 173 is what you would estimate next year would be as well. Until again, we get more current assessed values, which will happen in the next few months.
And Greg, one more question, and when we approved that, we kept 100% of the funds,
Yes, sir.
correct?
Yes.
That represents 100% of the funds available for us.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
The next slide is slide 26 is a map of the second area we'll talk about, which is the DeKalb County Economic Development Area, also known as SDI. That is the yellow boundary there. This area, I'll go into here on slide 27, was initially created back in 1994 and expires this year in 2025. The net assessed value of this area, I just want to kind of clarify how much is in, because you see there are 2 portions. The 2008 portion does not expire until June of 2038, but however, a very significant majority lies within that original area. You can see of assessed value speaking, $264.5 million is in the original, whereas only $359,000 of assessed values in that expansion area. In 2024, there was no money collected because there was a decision to pass through all dollars, and so that decision was made in 2023 for 2024. And for 2024, pay 25, the decision was made to approximately 90%. That's just kind of what it came to, but a decision equating to $317,880 of TIF is what this area collects. So that equates to $239.5 million roughly. You can see on the bottom footnote. So $239.5 million of AV was passed through to the overlapping tax units. So again, the estimate for this year's taxes, TIF collected would be the $317,880. And again, remember, as a reminder, the original portion expires in 2025.
Okay, so what's remaining now in the SDI TIF is $359,000
Of assessed value.
of assessed value?
Yes.
Okay, and that would equate into, is it like 2%?
Yeah, we're talking, roughly $5,000, I mean, is kind of TIF money that would.
TIF money is available.
Right. Again, that's just a rough, off the top of my head here, but, right, because that 300, that's the incremental assessed value we talked about, so that is multiplied by the tax rate, right? So there's really not, relatively speaking, anything much left at all after this year.
Anybody have any questions on that? We're all on the
Yeah.
same page with it?
So if it expires mid-year, do we collect on 6 months, or is it just done?
Great question. So, no, you would not collect on 6 months. However, there can be, and I did talk to Zach a little bit about this, as far as there's kind of two arguments that can be made. So one is that because it existed as of January 1, 2025, that it would theoretically exist for 26 because assessed values are done at a point in time, January 1, 25 for pay 26. I've seen some opinions of that happen. I've also seen opinions of the opposite where because it expires in 25, it does not exist for pay 26. So I've seen both opinions be had. But to the question of a half year, no, it would either be this is captured for 26 and we have to make a decision if we're capturing it, or no, we all kind of agree that that area doesn't exist for 26 and so, that portion is not captured.
You have an opinion on that?
I don't, we can't make, sorry, yeah, we defer to the attorney on.
That's fine. I just didn't know if you had an
Apologize,
opinion regarding that. Okay.
Like I've said, I've seen both opinions though. So, and I will say that this has not been, TIF areas throughout the state are kind of starting to expire, right? Because a lot of these were created in the mid-90s, early 2000s. So last 10 years or so, there's not been a significant number of TIFs that have fallen off. So this question is starting, in the last couple of years, has really started to arise. So. So New Millennium is the third area we'll talk about. Again, you can see there in the red boundary at the top. So this EDA on slide 29 was created back in 2000 and will expire in 2029. So I'll stop for a second because you do notice that all of the TIFs are starting to expire, right? SDI we just spoke about, the American Heritage in 31, this in 29. So there are a limited number of years in total as far as all of the TIFs go remaining. There are processes that are discussed in the beginning where new TIF areas can be created. TIF areas can certainly be amended. But generally speaking, a TIF area cannot be extended unless there's legal change to the requirements. You can extend a TIF area in terms of the boundaries. I don't mean that, but what I do mean is that let's say that when one of these areas expired, it was the Redevelopment Commission's determination, we want to keep going with that TIF, the base would be reset to the net. So think of it as you're starting, even though it's the same boundary, we're starting fresh all over again.
And if there's not going to be a bunch of development or anything happening in that, we're not going to get anything. I mean, there's the increase in value is going to be very small, and the cost of extending the time frame of that TIF is probably going to outweigh how much we're going to get back in the long run if we were to do that. If we knew that SDI was building another huge building and they were going to be investing a ton of money, something like that might make sense. Otherwise, if it expires, we generally probably going to let it expire, not do anything about it.
And so with this TIF area here, in 2024, collected $91,660 of TIF. In 2024, it was a decision that was 50% would be passed through. So that decision was made in 23 for pay 24. So it collected $91,660, and you could see that came on right at, the actual came in right at expectation there. And then in 25, the estimate would be that you would collect $189,680 as that was not passed through. That was collected at 100% for this TIF area. So that is the estimate for, again, for pay 2025. So 50% pass through for 24 equated to about $7.1 to $7.2 million of assessed value being passed through, which we'll go through some examples at the end about how that works. The next slide here, I just wanted to show is kind of a budget that I know John and Susan kind of passed along that was, I think, from a few months ago, showing kind of some of the illustration of what money could be spent here in '25. And you could see those broken down by TIF area as well as total. You could see that, you know, there's office supplies, service fees, legal fees, consultant fees, miscellaneous, et cetera, and those totaled $1,764,232. Slide 31 talks about some current and future projects. I know the County Road 56 project, and that I believe has been completed at this point. And then the road project for Cruz Plaza, I know that's just something that potentially could be spent. And then I know that, you know, before I even started, there were some projects that were TIF money was being used for in relation to public safety as well. So now I'm on the last handful of schedules. What I want to touch base on is the impact to overlapping taxing units. So what happens when TIF is either kept, either not passed through, you know, what does that look like? So I'm going to start on slide 32 with the American Heritage Village TIF. So the top half in all of these schedules will be similar. The top half of the schedule represents the current situation. So taxes payable 2025. So taxes payable 2025, and what are the assessed values, the tax rates, the property tax levies of all the units in the Kaiser taxing district where this TIF is captured. So I'm going to look at the county here, the DeKalb County and County Cumulative Capital Development Fund, the first two lines. The county has a net assessed value of about $3.4 billion. Its levy is $11,990,662. In order to generate that levy, it needs 0.3508 cent rate. Right, so think of it, in the state of Indiana, we have what are called maximum levies. So every county, city, town, school, library, et cetera, has a maximum amount that they're allowed to levy each year. There are things that can go outside of the maximum levy, including your cum capital development fund, debt at times, if it's approved, that can go outside of the, debt can be outside of the maximum levy, but all units for their general fund, think of it like that, have a maximum levy that they can generate. The amount of assessed value drives the tax rate up or down. The more assessed value there is, the less tax rate that's needed to support that levy, and vice versa. And counties and et cetera don't have to levy their maximum levy, but if they choose to, think of it like that. Assessed value is higher, less tax rate. If it's lower, it means you need more tax rate to support that levy. The cum capital development fund and some of those other funds I mentioned, like debt, are outside, and thus the more assessed value that there is, the more money that those funds generate. And the less assessed value, the less money they generate, because those tax rates can remain level. They don't change, they don't have to change up and down with assessed value. And so you kind of apply that logic to all the units. So Kaiser Township, Garrett Civil City Fire Territory, Garrett Kaiser Butler Community Schools, Garrett Public Library, Northeast Indiana Solid Waste, and the County Airport Authority. Those make up the tax rate in this district of 1.8023 cents. In this, you can see American Heritage Village in that box captures $9,653,100 of assessed value. With that, that generates the $173,000 of TIF that we've talked about. So what would happen on the bottom half if a decision was made to pass through all of that assessed value? What would occur? So that $9.6 million of AV would then flow through to all of those taxing units. So going back to the county, the AV increases from $3,418,000,000 to $3,427,000,000. In that first line, you can see that the tax rate declines from 0.3508 to 0.3498 to generate that same $11,990,000. So again, because there's more AV, the tax rate was able to come down to support that levy. The cum capital development fund, on the other hand, can see an increase in funds because of the additional assessed value. You could see off to the right-hand side, $2,963 of additional assessed value. Or excuse me, additional revenue, excuse me, from that additional assessed value. So that fund saw an increase in revenue. So if you do that for all of those units, that same kind of process, again, we're holding all else constant. We're looking at 25 with the TIF capturing versus 25 without capturing the TIF. The bottom half, again, shows that, and you can see that the total rate comes down 0.0236 cents. So it goes from 1.8023 to 1.7787. And the funds increase $6,496. Right, so that's the Cume Capital Development Fund, the Fire Protection Territory Equipment Replacement Fund, and the Airport Cumulative Building Fund. Now, again, some of those tax rate declines that, that there are, you can look by unit is what they would be, can lead to some circuit breaker changes. I know circuit breaker isn't a huge impact to some of these entities. Others it is. It just kind of depends on tax rates. But as you know, there are tax caps in the state of Indiana that taxpayers cannot pay above. So if the rate is above those caps, the units lose money to those caps. So changes in tax rate can, down on the downward end, can alleviate circuit breaker losses, can help in that way. I did want to at least mention that.
So Greg, if we, just real quick, so if we keep 100% of the available assessed value to us, it generates $174,000.
Yes, correct.
Okay, and it increases the tax rate by 0.0236.
That's correct. Yep, holding all else constant, that's kind of the trade-off, I guess you could call it, is that tax rate is a bit higher because you're capturing the TIF. If you didn't capture the TIF, there would not be $174,000 to do, whatever projects it is that you guys are.
Okay, and then it increases, so the shortage comes with the Cume Fund of $2,963 and the City Fire
Yes, the Garrett Civil City Fire Protection Territory Equipment Replacement Fund.
of $3,214.
Yep, and then the last one is the bottom, the County Airport Cumulative Building Fund.
Of $319, okay.
And again, those are gross levies. Again, there can be some changes in circuit breaker from that tax rate reduction. There can be some changes in there. And then in addition, units could also certainly pass, with a lower tax rate, they certainly can pass debt. They can approve debt to issue off of that. Obviously, we can't make that assumption necessarily here, but units could choose to issue debt if they want to and levy a higher tax rate.
Anybody any questions on that one? American Heritage Village?
Yep.
No? Okay.
Okay. The next two schedules are about SDI, and so these are kind of the reverse. And what I mean by that is because there was a decision to pass through a good portion of the assessed value. So the present situation on the top half, this is looking at the Wilmington 026 taxing district. This is where a significant majority of this value lies. This taxing district has a tax rate of 1.2697 cents in total, and that is made up of the county, Wilmington Township, Butler Civil City Fire Territory, DeKalb County Eastern Community Schools, Northeast Indiana Solid Waste, and the County Airport Authority make up this taxing district. So the top half shows what you all captured here. So the Redevelopment Commission captured $25,035,510 of assessed value. That generates $317,880 of TIF, as we talked about. The bottom half shows what would have happened if you if you collected everything. Because again, we did pass through, so we're looking at the opposite here. What if we didn't pass through anything? And you can see that incremental assessed value is about $264.4 million. So if we didn't pass through anything, the TIF, instead of receiving about $317,000, would have received around $4.2 million in 2025. Because, a significant portion of assessed value was passed through, what happened was what you can see with the tax rate. So the flip of what I've just talked about. So the county, for example, has an AV of $3.4 billion. It would have went down to $3,178 million because of that pass-through. The tax rate would have had to increase 0.0264 cents, and that Cume Capital Development Fund would have decreased $73,535. Again, applying that logic throughout all these funds, 0.3358 cents, because that goes from 1.2697 to 1.6055, and the Cume funds a change of $140,123. So again, here the decision was made to pass through, so you collected less TIF dollars, but in turn, that assessed value was pumped through to the overlapping taxing units, having some of those impacts discussed. And the next schedule is, it's still SDI, it's showing the impacts of SDI. This is the Butler City taxing district, because there is $125,900 of assessed value that's in that taxing district. So it's just showing the same impacts there, again, for a slightly different taxing district. That includes the city funds as well, on top of the fire. And I think there's a difference in the there is the Butler Carnegie Public Library as well in there.
And at this point, that has been expired, arguably.
Yes, correct. Yes, arguably, yes. But you're right, the significant majority, because what we talked about, if you go back, so we're looking at these assessed values of around $264 million. Of that, if I go back to the page here, almost all of that is in the original portion that's expiring. 359,000 roughly of assessed value, again, net assessed value, not incremental necessarily, is left after this year, correct?
Okay.
So that was SDI. And then lastly, I'll talk about the new millennium, which we are looking back at the 026 Wilmington taxing district again, here for the new millennium. So this TIF area, is $14.9 million of assessed value, generating $189,680 of TIF. Again, the same process here, except we're looking like we did at American Heritage. What if we would have passed all of this through? What would have happened? And you can see the total tax rate goes down 0.0153 cents, and the levy increases $8,739. However, you would not collect the $189,680 of TIF dollars to use for variety of whatever projects you will and have used for. So again, there is the pass-through decision that happens is individualized by TIF area. So there's 3 TIF areas here. So there's 3 different pass-through decisions. Again, I'll defer to Zach on legal aspects of pass-through, but as far as dollar amounts go, I know you can pass through a certain percentage of assessed value. I know in the past there have been times where a specific TIF dollar has been we want to collect this much TIF dollars, so an estimate is made at that time of how much assessed value do we need to collect that TIF dollars. So it doesn't have to be an all or nothing decision necessarily. From a financial perspective, it can be a portion decision, or again, you can collect all or pass through all. So that's
Can it be different, like, in the schools? Can they decide, like, to send it to the schools and not to the rest?
It cannot be different by taxing unit, correct. The only difference in what you can do by unit is the actual TIF dollars. If you chose to help a school, for example, just as an example, TIF can, up to 15% of your TIF can be used for schools, to help schools, and it has to be for specific programs. It's not just a general, here's, money for things that there's specific, it's like education programs, there's specific things it can be used for. So to answer the question, you cannot delineate how much assessed value goes through to each unit. Where you could is if you did collect the TIF, you can provide funds for different things, and that can be different for each unit.
Okay, any questions for Greg? A lot of numbers.
And I do just want to mention, I know SB 1, Senate Bill 1, was passed. It's now Senate Enrolled Act 1. That will certainly have an impact throughout the state on as the property tax system, as many of you are probably aware, including TIF areas. And that's something that we've been working with attorneys on and clients over the next few months. We plan to analyze that even further to try to determine what impacts that could have, not only in 26, but going forward. Because
What do you think? Is it going to decrease?
So generally speaking, there's a lot of new credits and deductions that are applicable. Specifically, I will say that is for homestead parcels and as well as the 2% parcels. So 2% parcels are farmland, long-term care, rental, like apartments, for example. Those also got a deduction that's phasing in over a 6-year time frame. So they get a new deductions beginning in 26. And it ramps up all the way to 33.4% deduction in 2031. So really the 2 properties that their assessed values and such are impacted the most are personal property, so equipment for companies had some changes, homestead properties, and as well as those 2% properties had some changes. So we are working to see, because there was a lot of changes that we could go for hours probably on just this one topic, and there's a lot of different changes that will impact each other. So we're actually working right now on a software to be able to calculate all the tax bills and determine what that could look like, so.
From a legislative standpoint, this year in 2025, what are they doing with TIFs in general?
Yeah, no, great question. So TIFs were largely remained, to our understanding, untouched as far as this recent legislative session. The one point I will make is that with Senate Bill 1, there is a potential for tax rates to increase, generally speaking. And why I say that is because of assessed values. We've just kind of went through this, right? Assessed values are coming down. So if that does happen as a result of Senate Bill 1, or for whatever other reason for that matter, then tax rates should increase over time if that's happening. Again, that doesn't have to happen, and that's just kind of preliminary thoughts. So if that does happen, the one TIF change that did come through the legislation is that TIFs cannot receive a windfall from that tax rate increase. So what I mean by that is that the tax rate, we were looking at, for example, New Millennium is 1.2697. If that tax rate over the years starts to climb because of other things, the Department of Local Government Finance is allowed to neutralize that so that the TIF isn't getting more and more and more money because of that tax rate increase. Now, what that will exactly look like is to be determined, but that was the one major kind of TIF change that happened in the session, is that, again, it cannot get a windfall from increases, really just a windfall, again, mainly from increases in tax rates is our understanding.
Okay. Good. Do we have any debt on any of our TIF districts right now?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay, so we don't have any requirements for that 200%?
Correct, yeah, not that I'm aware of. I do, yeah.
Okay.
On the SDI TIF that expires in 2025.
Yes, sir.
It's unknown if that's collectible yet this year. That's what you said.
So you will collect for 25.
Okay.
That's already, decisions been made, and that will be collected.
Okay.
Really, the more the, I guess you could call it the unknown is 2026, as far as, because you will have to make a decision for pass-through. So if the determination was, we want to collect a portion or some of that money, those discussions can certainly be had and see if that's illegal. If the TIF area does actually exist, I'm sure Zach would have to look through some things. But if the decision is we would not be capturing that, then it really doesn't necessarily matter if the TIF is there or not, because the decision would be to pass through all of it one way or the other. So
Who makes that decision if it's collectible for 2026?
for the pass-through, that would be the redevelopment commission. That would be you guys. And then,
If it's available to.
yeah.
It's one of those, like Greg said, this is not something that's been dealt with all that much, and the question is starting to come up more. So there's not super clear guidance or court cases that we can look at that the courts have said one way or the other. So there's an argument for either way. But ultimately, the decision ultimately comes down to all of you, and depending on what your decision is, we may have to do some research. That would lead. So let's say the decision was made to retain a large portion of the SDI TIF. The taxpayers in that area could potentially sue to challenge that determination. So there's a lot that goes into it, and I'd love to have a real great black and white answer for you, but I really don't.
So not on that specific one, but if a new TIF comes up, can you designate specific entities then? Not like year to year, but if you have a TIF, can you specify just certain entities within one when you create it?
So as far as like the school library, is that what you're referring to? You cannot specify really what you're specifying when you create the TIF is what parcels you're collecting. So the parcels obviously encompass a taxing district, which is a variety of units. So you cannot pick and choose even when you create a new one. The only thing you could do again when you create a new area is determine, okay, we're going to set aside X% for this unit, X% for that unit. But you can't, determine, we're only going to collect on the township's portion, for example.
Are you saying when you set it up, you're designating at the time that a certain amount of the money would just go automatically to one of these entities, the school or someone?
It's Andrew. Is that what you mean?
So during contract time for a new. Allow them to I don't believe so, other than an after the fact, a resolution of the commission that says this is just what we're gonna do, but I don't believe you can do that, but I guess if the county decides to set up some new, TIF areas, we can look deeper into that and see if that's a potential option.
That'd be good, so we could get you on record.
You know better.
Sorry. What you had said, you can't say we're only going to send to one entity year by year. So, but what you just said was you could make a resolution to pass through to a certain entity, kind of. Is that what you meant? I'm just trying to understand.
I'm saying hypothetically, I think we could do that as opposed to we're setting up this TIF area and in the formation documents, we're just saying, I don't, it doesn't, I don't feel like, and that's a great legal standard. It would surprise me if we could do that, but there are certainly people out there who deal with this a lot more than I do who, so if we create a new one, I mean, that's certainly something that we could look into and research that and see if it's an option.
I'm just trying to understand the extent of what can be done. I mean, the same goes for what can you spend the money on, what can't you spend the money on, what can you make a justification, what could legally be done, so.
Yeah, I can, and so as far as what can be spent, mainly it's capital expenditures, public safety, kind of in serving or benefiting that area, and that all has to be documented within your plan for the economic development area. So what you're spending money on has to be, sometimes plans are general, we're going to spend on public safety projects, for example, and things like that. It has to be in those plans for those areas. But to your question about assessed value, I know there are other states where you can kind of capture only portions of, for example, we're only going to capture the school's portion of the tax rate or what have you. But in Indiana, I've not seen that be done. I've not heard of that being done at least. But like I said, you can, for example, with New Millennium, 190,000, you can determine we're going to give so much of that money to certain entities. You can do that.
How easy, I'm sorry, I'm trying to understand more of this. How easy is it, so if you set up a TIF, new contract, new TIF, how easy is it? Can anything inside of that, except for like obviously expiration date, or maybe you can, what can be changed? Can pretty much anything be changed from the initial setup if it makes legal sense and can you change those terms?
Yeah, I can speak to some of it, Zach, and then correct me if I'm wrong, please. The expiration date piece of it. So expiration dates are set by the state. Okay. So a new TIF area, if it were created, has a 25-year life from the date debt is issued from that TIF. So once debt is issued, that 25-year clock begins. You cannot extend beyond that. So there isn't, at least at the moment, there's no legal, that we're aware of, ways to extend that. You can always end it sooner, but you cannot go beyond it.
Okay.
As far as other things, you could set up what can be spent. Now, there are limitations. Even if you want to spend it on certain things, there's some things that are not, TIF is not allowed to be used for. A lot of that's operating type expenditures. But as far as like when you're setting it up, again, you're kind of creating the maps, the parcels, the plan, what you're planning to spend from, things like that. I don't know, Zach, if you want to add anything.
Once you set it up, you can amend the TIF, and you're going to be subject to the time limitations and the expiration dates and all of that, but there's a whole statutory process for amending the TIF to make changes to whatever that thing would be. So that is doable. you can change the size of it, you can do all that. It just depends. A lot of times what you see is someone has a TIF and then they want that bigger. Instead of making that area bigger, they create a new one around it because you don't want to, if you go to amend the original one, you can, then the new area is also going to be subject to the expiration date on the original area. So there are things you can do. The amendment process is I would say clearly spelled out in the code, but it's in the code.
Yeah, and that would seem like it would be rough anyways, because if you truly extended it, then where would the base point come from? Back when it was originally made, or would it come from a point in time at which you're extending it? So
Yeah.
I'm just trying to understand the extents and what's set in stone, what's not set in stone. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
And
I have one more question. So these TIFs were all done before I was around. Who begins that? Like, do the commissioners like request this, or is it just RDC? Like, how does that even?
Usually starts with redevelopment commission, and then
Okay.
it has to go through
Channels?
planning commission, county commissioners.
Okay, so redevelopment begins it and then goes for approval with others. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it can certainly be recommended to begin, the commissioners say, hey, we know some stuff's happening, but this body is who does the declaratory resolution to start the whole process.
Okay.
We'll open it up for public comments, so limited to questions regarding what a TIF is and questions for us.
I didn't think that it was, but then it kind of opened up to
Yeah.
me, so.
We're kind of there.
The one thing that I've heard discussed, possibility of the SDI TIF in another year. That would go completely contrary to what you have all. A question I guess I can.
Lynn, is your mic on? Thank you.
It's the same.
I guess just one other thing that I would like to add is that it also affects fire departments outside of Wilmington Township and the city of Butler. I mean, as far as the tax rates, because the tax rates for the school is the majority of your tax rate. So that whole eastern side of the county that's part of DeKalb Eastern Schools is all affected by the change in the tax rates going to the schools. And so that also does affect Spencer Township, Concord Township, Newville, Troy, and Stafford, even though they're outside of the Wilmington Township where SDI TIF is located, but just because of them overlapping taxing districts primarily affecting the schools. Yes, it would also affect the county and the airport and the solid waste district and things as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Lynn. Anybody else have any questions? No, seeing none? Okay, you guys have any questions for Greg? No? Great, okay, let's move on in our agenda. Greg, if you'd stay there, though, we're gonna have some other questions for you in a minute. I'm gonna bring up Concord Township Fire Department. They have a UT funding request for $68,678. Brad Johnson?
Brad Johnson, I'm the Assistant Chief of the Concord Township Fire Department. I submitted a request, I can read that so it's all on the record. To the
We've-
redevelopment
We've read
commission.
it, so you can just
Oh, okay.
summarize what we're
So
doing.
in summary, what we've been trying to do for a number of years now, we're a very small township. Our entire coverage area is like 30 square miles. Our population base inside of our immediate coverage area is also very small. So that leaves us with an operating budget year to year in the realm of about $64,000. Of that $64,000, probably 90% goes to just basic operating costs to keep the doors open, keep the trucks running. It makes it very difficult for us to pursue projects to grow the department as far as resources and apparatus goes. So the project we've been trying to find funding for about 4 years now is to fund a UTV grass fire rig. We have been looking at quotes. I looked at John Deere Gator, Kawasaki has a mule, there's a Kubota UTV, and then Polaris makes fire service specific UTV. We also looked at quotes for trailers to transport the UTV from one location to another. What we ended up going with was the Polaris quote. That's what I submitted to you guys, because it offers the largest cab size so that we can fit more people in the unit itself. It also has the upgraded suspension that we would need to support the firefighting rig that would go in the back of it, and then it comes from the factory with the fire skid and pump as a whole package. So what we requested was the funding to purchase that firefighting UTV and the trailer to transport it.
Great, thanks. Where is exactly the fire station at?
We're right in the middle of St. Joe.
Okay,
So I don't know how familiar everybody is with St. Joe. Do you know where the pizza shop is there at the stop sign?
Yep.
We are one street over to the east
okay.
on Hart Street.
So within the district, we have SDI New Millennium. Are you servicing that?
So they are outside of our direct coverage area. However, we are in Butler's first due for mutual aid coverage for their entire southern half of their territory. That includes all of the SDI properties, everything south of US 6. We are in their first due, so we do respond quite often. Outside of automatic mutual aid, we respond as additional manpower and resources on brush fires, on search and rescue, on car crashes. So we have a very close working relationship with Butler. Would be something that would benefit the Butler Fire Department. They themselves do not have a UTV firefighting rig at all. Like us, they have a pickup truck with a big pump and a big tank in the back. They're very great resources for fighting field fires and brush fires, but there are certain circumstances, like with all this rain we've had, our big pickup trucks would not really be able to go off-road, whereas a smaller UTV would be able to.
Okay. And you're saying that is not something Butler has right now?
Correct.
What about Auburn?
Auburn has a UTV, but I don't think theirs is set up specifically for firefighting. Theirs is more for rescue.
Okay.
They use it during the county fair. It's more for transporting people, not firefighting.
Okay. In your opinion, how would this support or promote our TIF districts?
I guess I don't understand the question.
So what we look at, one of the measures we always look at is we have to benefit that TIF district because that's where we're getting the funds out of.
Correct.
How does this benefit that TIF district?
This would provide additional fire rescue services to the TIF district directly.
Okay.
This would be essentially a small fire truck. It's an extra apparatus that we don't possess and that Butler itself does not possess. So this would be an additional resource available for public safety.
Okay. How many runs do you anticipate using that for?
Per year, direct field fire, brush fire is about 50. When it comes to search and rescue deployments, another 15 to 20.
Same 50 just in your.
That we would respond to between us and Butler. Yeah. We just came through a busy season. When everything dries out in the spring, everybody lights fires. We usually pick up again late July, early August when everything dries out. When we start getting into the dry season with no rain. Because we have so many railroad lines that go through our part of the county, They always come through and do resurfacing and grinding. It always throws sparks. It always catches ditch banks and fields on fire. We respond on that a lot.
Any other questions for him?
I have a couple. I guess just additional comment to back up what Chief has said. While yes, both departments have grass rigs, pickups. He's speaking of railroad access. That is a big problem with Garrett. You can't, no matter what they say, you can't get pickup trucks down a lot of the railroad access areas. We've had to walk half a mile to get to the front of a train because by the time they realize they need to stop, they're past the intersection that they need to stop at. So that is one huge benefit. The weight, the rain, additional benefit, being able to use it as rescue is also an additional benefit. But going back to the specifics of the Polaris and the skid unit, I tried to look up the skid unit specifically, and because it's just in the quote, I couldn't find it. Do you know what size of water tank that has on it?
So the one that is included, I know in here they just call it, I think, a UHP. It's a QTAC 85. So it's an 85-gallon water tank.
Okay.
I believe the pump is a 16 horsepower pump, which is capable of 1,200 PSI and somewhere in the realm of 200 gallons a minute or something like that at full capacity.
And then just for clarification, also for the other board members, trying to get the exact wording that you used. The quote's from Polaris, and Polaris is quoting it from the government and defense purchase. So that is their bottom line. Any state governmental agency comes in and they get this price. So no matter whether you buy it from Polaris, New York, Polaris, South Dakota, Polaris, Indiana, that is the price that those governmental units will pay. So it's not like I can go to Ben Davis and get one price and I can go to Shepherd's and get another. It's
Correct.
Polaris
That's the company price. That's
Polaris
what
has
they
a set
offer.
price, and
So there is no negotiation on that?
there is no negotiation on the Polaris.
Okay. And then you mentioned that you looked at some other units, like,
Yes, I had looked at and gotten quotes, like I said, for John Deere, Kawasaki, and Kubota. All of those came in at a lower base price for the actual machine itself, but the fire skid and the wiring, the extra electronics was not included in those. We would just be buying the base unit, and then we would have to purchase all of the extra stuff later, and then have somebody install it later. And when we compared the prices of buying it piecemeal, putting it all together in a unit, the prices were either the same or slightly more expensive to have somebody else do all the installation. Whereas the Polaris comes directly from the factory put together.
do you have those written out, like in a file somewhere?
I have yes, with me, I do have the printouts for those other 3 units.
Okay. Another thing we always ask for is comparisons with other.
Yeah, and I can send those in an email attachment like I did with this.
Okay.
I do have those other ones.
Great.
That's all the questions I have at this time.
Anything, Chris?
Is St. Joe in the allocation area then? I mean, everything fits as far as the,
Well, it would, so what they're doing is they're providing backup services for Butler, and Butler's the primary for the TIF districts. So arguably, they are providing services for the TIF district as well. So it applies. And then, as Doug was saying, with the railroad tracks, anything on the railroads, that's a unit
Well,
that we
and
use.
specifically going with the railroad, we've had fires every year for the last 10 years along the railroad right-of-way where we have to park our trucks at the road and walk back with hand tools. Sometimes in the dark, sometimes, yeah. There's almost no access to railroad property unless you're at a road crossing.
Can I ask, so, because we have to focus on economic development area, so supporting Butler in general is great. How often is this going to be used in the, to deal with something around SDI or New Millennium, as opposed to just, out in fields in the area supporting Butler?
Because of the nature of emergency services, I can't answer that with any definitive, it's impossible to predict.
And I understand that, and that's something I think we'll need to look into, because I think just so we're clear, it's not a question of does it support the Butler Fire Department? Clearly it will, and that's great. It's the real question is, how does it benefit and provide services to the economic development area? And those are very specific to SDI and New Millennium. Those areas are not, there's not a whole lot of area outside of where their actual facilities are. So that's something that we'll have to, do a little more digging on and look into, because that's the real question is, with Butler, they're the first responder for all the stuff out there. The concern I have is, while this would be a great tool, is it going to be used around in those areas? Is it going to support? I'm not saying we can't, but I think it's something that we need to do a little looking into.
I know that area quite well, and I would say at the SDI plant, almost everything that you need to get to, you can get to. With the roads, and I mean, obviously a field that catches fire there, that happens, but as far as the immediate, like that area as itself, you need to get to it. There's a road that gets you to it.
Any other questions for him? Thank you.
All right, thank you for your time.
I'm going to open this up for public comment on this. Just if anybody would like to make a comment regarding in favor or against from the public.
I just have a question. Does it actually have to be within the TIF area now? I thought that changed.
It doesn't have to be within the TIF area. How we've kind of looked at it is, does it benefit the TIF?
Okay, so, but it could be spent there. It's not like it can't.
Correct.
It can be spent as long as it's for public safety anywhere in the county.
No, it has to benefit. So, the Auburn hazmat facility, for an example, that's the only hazmat. It's a hazmat training facility, and there's big considerations for hazmat around all of those factories. So the project benefits, ideally the project benefits those specific economic development areas. So it's not just we can provide, so it used to be you couldn't provide operating funds at all. Then they changed it to where you can do that for public safety, but it still has to benefit the economic development area.
Okay. I think it was last year's May meeting, the question was asked whether tip dollars could be spent on a jail. So that would benefit the whole county, and that's why that could be done.
Yeah. That was a question that I asked
Yeah.
that actually, and I asked when Greg was
Couldn't
giving the
remember
presentation.
who asked it, but I think it was Greg that answered,
Just so we
right?
could understand what TIF could be used and not be used for.
I don't think we had a very clear answer on could it be. I mean, I think it's a question of what can you make the argument for, and does the public support, that sort of situation. But yeah, it still has to, you still have to go back to that economic development area and say, how does this thing benefit what?
Right. I'm the only reason I'm thinking that this does benefit the TIF area in general. I mean, being on the east side, being same general area and responding to those, that's what I was just wondering if it seems very similar to the jail scenario. It's going to benefit that, but this is also going to benefit it. Only reason I'm asking the question. So.
Yeah, and Andrew, I think the answer as far as what we heard with the jail was no, because the jail is not benefiting directly those TIF areas. I think that's kind of where we left it at.
I think the minutes say that it could be.
I think if I remember right, Jason said I need to look into
Yeah, we left it
Okay.
at that point, but we kind of had the understanding that it doesn't.
Okay,
That point, because that's where we left it.
okay.
Wouldn't the entire county be using the jail?
Possibly.
I had thought the minutes said that, yes, it could be used on a jail.
We'd have to look.
Yeah, and that's fine. I mean,
And that's
look it up
beyond what
later.
we're doing right now, so. Do you have any comments regarding this particular thing? No? Anybody else? Okay, I'm going to close the public hearing of this. Does the committee have any questions or discussion regarding it? No? Good. Are you to the point you want to look at doing this? Do you want to table this for further discussion? What's the will of the committee?
I'd like to table it.
You want to think about it a little bit more?
Yeah.
Okay.
I see both sides.
We see the other quotes as well.
Okay. So for our next meeting, if you could put together quotes for the other options we have, and then maybe you can talk with Butler Chief about how this is going to positively impact the TIF districts, and let us know what you guys think with that. That'd be great. You can re-present it at that point. Okay, thank you. So we are going to table this. Do we need a motion for that?
Make a motion to table Concord's request.
Okay.
I second that.
Any discussion? All in favor signify by yes.
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 Opposed? Okay, Carrie, we're going to table that. Okay, so our last is the determination of our pass-through amounts. And we are looking so we can meet the June 15th deadline, so that happens in our meeting this time. All right, so Greg, I'm just going to kind of summarize what you said and correct me if I'm wrong on any of this, okay? So what I'm looking at is the total amounts that we have available to us. And so looking at the American Heritage Village, I'm looking at slide 25. It looks like we retained 173,980 this year. And of that, that was retaining 100% of that fund, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So then the new millennium, I'm sorry, American Heritage. The total incremental assessed value is 9.653 million. Of that, we retained 173,980, which is 100% for this year. So going forward for this year, for 25 going into 26, the numbers we're looking at probably about the same, about 174,000, retaining $9.6 million. If we pass all of it through, that makes it, that reduces the levy to 1.7787, or a decrease of 0.0236. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And that would impact the CUME fund of $2,963 and the Garrett Civil Fire Protection of $3,214 and the Airport Authority of $319.
Yeah, those are the gross levy impacts. Again, there could be net levy impacts from circuit breaker changes, but
Right. Roundabout numbers, understand. We don't know the final numbers yet. Does everybody have an understanding of that? Okay. All right, so let's just focus on American Heritage then instead of going to all three of them at the same time. So what would you guys like to do? Last year we kept 100%. I think we've kept 100% for the last couple of years, haven't we?
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's always been 100%.
for American Heritage?
Yeah,
I thought it was.
it don't generate that much.
Okay. Would anybody like to make a motion on that? Or discussion, or?
I'm the new guy. So we typically do keep,
we've kept 100% of it for,
and if we don't use that 100%, it gets allocated back, right?
yeah, so if we pass it through, then we don't have access to it, it just goes into the general fund, is what it is.
I'll make a motion to keep 100%.
I'll second.
Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We're keeping 100% of the American Heritage Village. Okay, moving into, let's do the easy one, which is the New Millennium. New Millennium has a total assessed value of $14.9 million. The gross amount collected is $189,000 is what we could potentially keep. If we pass that through, it looks like it makes hardly any change in the net tax rate, 0.0153. Historically, have we kept this one as well?
We've done 50%.
We go back and forth on this one, right? Okay, and I do remember a few years ago, we decided that we needed to keep at least $200,000.
I don't remember which. That may have been.
Was that SDI?
SDI.
Okay.
250,000.
250 out of SDI is what we've,
That's what it was before
we,
this last, yeah, before it
Okay.
expired.
all right. So, again, keeping this for, it's 189,000, roughly, so 190,000 going forward.
Yeah, we'd talked about that, not passing any through, and we was all right with that. The school was all right with that because it was going to the
fire
Butler
department.
Police and Butler Fire, and we was willing to do that.
Okay. Anybody have any questions on that? Discussion?
Make a motion to keep it the same as 2025. Is that
Okay,
good?
so we kept 100% in 2025?
Second that.
Keeping,
Okay, so the motion is to keep 100%. We have a second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye.
aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We're keeping 100% of the New Millennium. Okay, now for the SDI. So SDI, and I'm going to follow up with what Lynn had said earlier, and we have had lots of discussion about this one, and I think we kind of came to a consensus that it's done. And I think that's what we did put out to the public as well. Personally, I'm done. I don't want to look at it anymore. I think we pass that off 100% at this point, whether we can or whether we can't. I think that we let that go, my opinion. Anybody else have any thoughts on that?
It was actually, the bonds were actually paid off years before it expired. So my thoughts, the TIF should end when when it's paid off.
Right.
So that should have happened several years ago.
The bonds were paid off. Those bonds were paid off 2 years ago.
Oh, at least it's probably closer to 10
Yeah.
That's been
years ago.
We've paid off all of the bonds on all of the TIFs. That's what I was asking about debt earlier, is we have no debt left.
Yeah, no,
The SDI bond has been paid off for quite some time. Okay.
yeah.
14? Yeah, so that's my thoughts. Anybody else want a different feeling on that?
I'm good with that.
I think just to clarify the earlier conversation, it was not necessarily we need to do something. It was there's gray area on this expires this year, just so we're all aware. And part of that was because there's that gray area, as opposed to us just saying, well, it expires this year, we're just not going to do anything. Assuming you decide we're passing it all through, we're still going to send out the pass-through letter just to make sure we're following all the requirements. And we have to keep in mind that there are two SDI areas. There's the 2008 that expires in 2038, and the one that expires this year. But keep in mind, from the rough numbers, the 2008 SDI would bring, if we kept it all, it would give us $5,000. So And something we can even look into or talk about later is if we think we're gonna continue to pass that through every year, we could even look into, and I'm not completely up to speed on the process and if it would be worth it to do so, but you can end a TIF area early. So if we're always gonna send the money back, that is an option that we could look into.
But at this point, we're looking at total assessed value of like 318,000, something like that. Is that right, Greg?
318,000 is the TIF collected for 25. That's
Okay,
the TIF.
what's the assessed value remaining?
359,000 of net
359,
assessed value
okay.
for the 2008.
We're dealing with $359,000, and so that's what you're saying, it's turning into a $5,000. So it really doesn't matter. So whether you want to keep it or not, so. All right, so that's the last one. So
I'll make a motion that we pass through 100% of the SDI money, or assessed value.
I'll second.
okay, motion and second, any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. We are passing through 100% of the 359,000. Okay, is there any other business before us today?
I guess just so that we're passing through 100% of all of it.
We're passing, yes.
Both the 2008 and the expiring.
Whatever's left on SDI is being passed through. Yes.
I know that's what you meant. I just wanted to make sure it was clear
That's
for the
a
minutes and
good
everything.
clarification, so.
I have a comment on that, on that other portion that we would receive 5,000 for. It's probably gonna cost more a year to operate that than you'll get. You need an attorney, need a report on it every year from Baker and Tilly, and that's more than
That's fair.
you're gonna run in the red real quick.
Okay, so why don't we put that on our future agenda for looking at that, maybe ending that one early. If Greg, would you just work with Zach on what that looks like and how we do it?
Yeah, yep, I'm happy to.
Okay, great. Okay, any other business for the public? Oh, we do have one. Good.
My name is Nick Stefan, I'm the executive. I'm lucky enough to be involved in 3 TIF districts, from one from Garrett, one from Auburn, and one from County. And this.
Can you turn your mic on?
Oh, sorry.
That's all right.
This one is the only one that I've ever heard of that passes through any money. While the money you've passed through tonight doesn't benefit me directly, I appreciate that you're diligently looking at what is best for all of the service area. So it makes me optimistic that someday perhaps you'll pass through some money to me as well, which I appreciate. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yep.
Do you let anybody that's watching when the other ones expire to? I know you guys have the data, but anybody that's
Go
watching.
ahead, Greg.
I know what it is, but just for anybody that's watching, the public would know when those dates are.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir, yeah. The American Heritage Village expires December 1, 2031. I'll go ahead and read it. The 2008 portion of SDI expires June 17th, 2038, and New Millennium expires December 31st, 2029.
Okay. Any other comments? Seeing none? Motion to adjourn?
Make a motion that we adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We're adjourned.